I knew that money didn't actually just spill out of the ATM, I had gotten my first lesson in economics, and that was from my third grade teacher. In third grade, our teacher in social studies taught us that there were three things that everybody needed in order to have the baseline in life, and that was food, clothing, and shelter. Well, as I looked at that as a 7-year-old, I skipped a grade, smart cookie. So as I looked at that, I began to ask the question, okay, food, clothing, and shelter. I have that, but I walk past the guy on the street every day who doesn't have the majority of those things. Quagmire. Roll forward. So as I've gone through life, I've started out there at 7 with this lesson about economics, and now I'm here today, and as Gabby said, I'm the CEO of a company that works here in New Orleans, and we provide renewable energy solutions to low and moderate income customers that allow them to get a little bit farther on what they have. But this whole picture is bigger than just my 7th grade class, those of us who sit in this room. So let's do a little bit of a history lesson to try to understand this and appreciate this a little bit better. Let's go back. Thomas Jefferson, one of our first Americans. He proposed the solution to the ending the slave trade, and his solution was shot down by the rest of the founding fathers. However, he also penned the words while proposing the solution that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, but in his lifetime, he held 607 slaves on his plantation in Virginia. So then I had to start asking the question, the man on the street, the people in my house, Thomas Jefferson, wait a minute, something's starting to not look right here. I was taught to believe that the economic situation in the United States of America was one that was morally neutral. But I couldn't help but understand that Thomas Jefferson had a philosophy and a lifestyle that were in conflicts. He looked at his slaves that he owned as economics, and at the slavery system as a whole as a moral blight on the whole of the United States. Fast forward to today. Let's look at the mobsters and the gangsters that we talk about. Now, they're transparent. They tell you with most obvious truth that they look over their shoulders and they watch their back, because the way that they get their food, clothing, and shelter, those three things that my social studies teacher taught us about, usually is not lawful, and it is certainly unethical how they get it. So, Thomas Jefferson, he had a duplicity. The gangster, the mobster, they're the underworld. They told you the truth. Okay, let's rewind one more time, just a little bit. Early 20th century, you have these wildcat capitalists. These guys made more money than even Bill Gates and Warren Buffett. They are actually called the richest men in the history of the world. I mean, that is like, whoa, I can't even imagine people who have that kind of money. But you and I know them very well because at the end of their lives, after they amassed this incredible wealth, they started foundations that you and I know, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Carnegie Foundation. And again, as I look at this, I see this duplicity. It shows up again. How does this work? They made all of this money, and then at the end of their lives, they set up a system where folks that were like them, for-profit enterprises, could not take advantage of the dollars that were made by them to do good in the world. To me, this is a quandary that makes me ask the question of you, and I had to ask the question of myself. Because in my family, we're pretty equally split. There's a group of us on one side that are entrepreneurs, and then the rest of us, we work for other people. And since I'm on this side of the page, being an entrepreneur, when I got ready to start my company, I asked myself about that duplicity. Is there not a place in what we do where you can be a for-profit who does good? Because the way that the foundation leaders left it for us is that you have to be a not-for-profit organization in order to benefit from the dollars that were raised years and years ago, often at the expense of the people who are now meant to be served by the nonprofits. So, I'm looking at this particular point in time, and I come to understand a few things that I'd like to leave you with. That we have to embrace social enterprise, and not just not-for-profit social enterprise, but social enterprise that is for-profit. because the for-profit social enterprise allows us to examine the ills and the woes of the world and to use the dollars that are made when you actually have a merchantable idea or merchantable service and then reinvest those funds directly back into that community. Local social entrepreneurship, local economic development. We see it in an institution that's very popular here in New Orleans. The social aid and pleasure clubs that produce those amazing second lines that we all love, they are one of the most iconic institutions of this type. They were created when blacks in New Orleans were not able to have burial insurance, nor were they able to have health insurance. And so they built a collective in their own community. And till this day, it still exists and it still stands. And yet, we try to regulate how it is that they do the second lines each week. And that is a current conversation that we're all having, that we should all explore and begin to understand that there is a dichotomy that is beginning to happen with the second lines. Are they for-profit? Are they not for profit? And how should it work? And so I'll leave you with this last observation. Throughout history of our economic system, there's one thing that we all probably missed in all of this. There's one group of actors in the midst of this entire circumstance that has held two roles. And I'm talking about African Americans. African Americans are the only people in the history of the American economic institution who have held two positions. They have been both the commodity and participants in the actual economy. Now, I bring this up because people often ask the question, well, we have the Trail of Tears, and our Jewish brethren, they've gone through the Holocaust. And then we also have the Japanese and Chinese Americans who were interned. The Chinese and Japanese Americans were interned for the purpose of excluding them from the rest of the population. Our Jewish brethren experienced the Holocaust to be produced and presented to a tormented death. And then our brothers and sisters and ancestors through the Trail of Tears, they were being removed from their bountiful land. However, it is only and solely African Americans who have been both the commodity and the people who work to build the economy. So I leave you and I say, all of these lessons, your food, your clothing and shelter, where you buy them, how you earn the money to do it, it all matters. Money matters. Thank you.